When you listen to music on your hi-fi system, does it sound like you have a live concert happening in front of you in the listening room? And is that important to you really when you're choosing system components and most importantly, speakers? I can see why it would be important to some people, but maybe less so to others. But I received an email a few weeks ago from a chap called Basker, and he asked me some interesting but challenging questions. And it was such a great topic that I thought it would make a great video where we could all have some inputs to try and help Basker with his situation. And I'm just going to pick up my notes to explain this situation. I'm just going to paraphrase Basker's email, but he explains that he felt he has spent a lot of money on hi-fi gear, but he has not achieved the sound that he is looking for. He said he has owned both Dynaudio Emit speakers and some Bowers & Wilkins 700 speakers with a Roxanne amplifier, and he has listened to PMC's Prodigy speakers too. But none of them have given him the sound that he is looking for, which is a live concert sound playing in front of him in his room. So his questions are, number one, can I suggest some tower speakers that are not too expensive to achieve this sound, a live concert sound in his room? And his second question is, do you have to spend a lot of money to get really good hi-fi speakers? So as I said, both of those are great questions and not that easy to answer. But I think before we go down any one rabbit hole of suggestions of maybe speakers and gear, I think we need to look at or analyze this whole situation, because I think it's clear that Basker has a target in his mind. He knows what sound that he is looking for, the type of sound he is trying to achieve, but he just doesn't know what he needs to do or what maybe gear or speakers he needs to buy to achieve it. And I think there's probably something common in that. I think most people, most of us, I know I have been through something similar in the past. But I think it's great that he has a target to begin with, because I remember when I was a much younger audiophile, I didn't really know what sound I was looking for. I just knew I didn't quite have it. I was looking for something different or more than what I currently had. But I think the challenge is knowing what you want and knowing how to achieve it. And it's in that vein where I want to make my first recommendation, because for me there's nothing worse in hi-fi than, it's not even spending the money on it, it's the excitement that you get when something new is coming, and then if that doesn't live up to your expectations of it, that can be quite a disappointing thing. And I think it's easy to go in a circle, round and round in a circle, not really achieving very much, and it seems like that's the route Basker has been going. But like I said, on that vein, I think my first recommendation to anyone in a similar situation to this is that the best thing you can do, and the thing you really need to do, is to try and listen to as many different hi-fi systems, and in particular different speakers and different types of speakers, different styles of speakers as you can. And that's where, I suppose in the UK, we're very fortunate to have access to some very good, not only hi-fi shows, but hi-fi dealers who run events. My advice would be to Basker to go to as many shows as you can. Spend the time and the money up front, putting the time in to try and listen to as many different, let's say, speakers, amplifiers and hi-fi systems as you can. Not necessarily to specify exactly what you like, but to try and work out what type of speaker do you prefer. Is it a box speaker? Is it a panel speaker, a horn speaker, an open baffle speaker? I think the first stage would be to try and get that aha moment. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Even if it's listening to systems that are above your budget, it points you in the direction to try and narrow down your focus, because it's great that hi-fi, we have so many different speaker manufacturers and they all give you the best sound, they all give you natural sound, but they're all different. And I think the pros and cons of different, especially different speaker types, panel, open baffle, horn and box speakers, their strengths and weaker points are so stark that narrowing that down to begin with, I think, could save a lot of time and a lot of heartache. A live concert sound type of music presentation is one that's going to have a lot of energy. It's going to be lively. It's going to be very dynamic. I think it's one that's going to be more about the music as a whole, the whole listening experience and how that makes you feel, again, with its energy, with its liveliness and dynamism, more so than a sound presentation that's maybe more analytical, more about the specifics or specificity of music, where it can be more, about the music's production, and I would call that more of a studio sound. But at the same time, for me, a live concert sound, because it's about energy and dynamism, it's probably not going to be like a very relaxed, easygoing, sat back type of sound. So straight away, we can start to work out what types of speakers, or certainly amplifiers, tube versus solid state, that possibly is going to work better, obviously, for Basker. I also think it's sensible to analyse the speakers that he said he has owned and listened to before, to try and work out why they might not have been what he's looking for, so he can make different recommendations. And I had Dynaudio's Emit 30 speakers here to review back in March 2022. And I thought they were a good all-rounder speaker for the money. They certainly give you a really good amount of bass energy for their size, and that bit was likely okay for Basker, but maybe their main character being a little bit more laid back. So they are quite a fun speaker, but also an easygoing one. Maybe it's the easygoing nature that's the bit that wasn't quite working. Maybe it wasn't energetic enough for him. But I've also had here, higher up in Dynaudio's range, the Evoke speakers, and they definitely had a more immediate sound to their mid-range and high frequencies. So maybe the Evokes would be a better Dynaudio choice for a live concert type of sound without going too high and too expensive in the Dynaudio range. Bowers & Wilkins 700 speakers I know pretty well because I have reviewed the bookshelf speakers in the past, and I have a family member who owns the largest 702 tower speakers, so I've listened to them some as well. We all know Bowers speakers can sound very clear and really quite lively, so I'm quite surprised that Basker didn't gel with these and didn't find that these were the type of sound that he was looking for. I think there's something interesting in that. And I do think maybe that is down to maybe a system amplifier speaker not matching up properly, because we know Bowers speakers can be but quite demanding on the gear, quite demanding on the amplification to sound their best. But also maybe it's just, I find Bowers speakers are not massive in their bass output, so maybe it was that balance that wasn't quite working right for him. It's obviously difficult to tell. Lastly, he said he listened to PMC's Prodigy speakers, which I got to hear briefly at a Munich high-end show a couple of years ago. And I remember the Prodigy sounding very clear and focused. So for me, more about the music's production specificity, again, more of what I would call a studio sound, more so than a live concert, move a lot of air type of sound. So I can see why Basker probably didn't think they were right for him as well. So what type of speakers can we recommend that would give a more live concert sound? So I'm thinking we probably need to move air, right? So we need larger drivers, maybe wider baffle type of speakers, like big chunky boy type of speakers, maybe ones with higher sensitivity so we get more out of them from the same amplification powers. That's the way my thought process is going. And I'm sure some people will be thinking about the People's Champion speaker, the Wharfdale Linton, because it's a speaker that makes a lot of people very happy. But I don't know if they would be the obvious choice for a live concert sound type of speaker, because maybe they are a little too laid back as well. But I'm definitely thinking along this lines of speaker type. So that makes me think of the Super Linton speakers, but maybe as a design, they're also a little bit too much about the music specificity to be an obvious choice, but they are a very clear, very fast sounding speaker that can deliver a good amount of bass too, so maybe they are a consideration at their price point. My line of thinking can't help but go down the JBL speaker route, with a speaker like the famous S4367 with its 15-inch bass and compression driver, mids and highs. All in, it's going to be a lively and dynamic speaker. And I have heard them, and they do have, with the right type of music, that kind of live kind of edge, that edge to the sound, which can be a very good thing with the right type of music. And they also have a 94 dB sensitivity, so they're going to move some air from, not huge amounts of power. So for me, the JBL does very much fit the sound profile, but maybe not the price, because those are premium speakers, but worth it depending on how you look at it. Now, JBL do make some smaller versions of the similar smaller versions. I don't know how similar they are, but smaller, more price comparable to what Baska's been looking at before. But of course, a smaller speaker, smaller driver, it's not going to move as much air, so it's not going to be as dynamic sounding as the big boys. So it depends on, I suppose, how much live concert sound do you really want. I'm sure some of you will be thinking of Klipsch offerings, such as the Forte 4 maybe, because they have large drivers for big bass and compression drivers for mids and highs. So they are dynamic sounding speakers too. And they also have a wider cabinet, and they are very much a move air type of design too. So maybe they could hit Baska's sound profile for more modest money compared to the JBL. I think a non-traditional tower speaker option to consider could be a Zoo Audio speaker, as they are seemingly large, single driver, high sensitivity speakers with no crossover, so they should sound very lively. But I have not listened to any Zoo speakers personally, so I might have this suggestion wrong. But a pair of DW6 for around $2,000 depending on the spec and finish could be an interesting outside of the mainstream speaker option. And I would also say here, just as a bit of a general suggestion and general rule, adding subwoofers to any of the speakers that I've recommended so far would be a great way to increase dynamics, increase scale, increase the amount of air that you're moving for, a bigger, more energetic, more lively, and a better balance depending on setup, sound in the room. So considering adding subwoofers to any of the speakers, whether you're looking for a live concert sound or not, has got to be something worthy of consideration. But while I'm talking about consideration, there's two other speakers that I think very much, well, one in particular will very much hit the sound profile, but the prices are higher again. But they do offer something very much outside of the usual box, excuse the pun. Firstly is the new avant-garde acoustic Colibri speakers, which is a more, in inverted commas, affordable horn speaker from avant-garde that I saw at the Munich high-end show a few years ago, and they are just being released onto the market now, I believe. And it's essentially a sub-satellite system, which is always a good choice. And the satellite part is an avant-garde horn speaker, which they're always very high sensitivity, very dynamic, very kind of live, energetic, raw, energetic sounding, which is really fantastic. But the sub part are big 18-inch subwoofers, avant-garde subwoofers. So that's going to be a very lively, very big sounding overall system. Of course, higher in price, but one that's, I think, very exciting, very different, very cool looking, and one that I think will hit the sound brief for sure. And then the next speakers are ones that I haven't heard or seen in the flesh, but they just stand out to me because they look very cool. And I'm referring to the new Audio Neck OBI line of open baffle speakers, the Min, Mid and Max. And these can have up to 15-inch drivers, so they're going to move a lot of air. And they have a very unusual mid-range driver called a duopole driver that I listened to last year with different Audio Neck speakers. And they were very interesting for their presentation, for their combination of spaciousness, but still with a very lively presentation. And this would be a more expensive speaker investment again, but I think they look really cool. And again, these are large speakers, large drivers, high sensitivity that should move a lot of air and hit that sound brief just bang on. But I've not seen or heard these speakers in the flesh. I just think they look really cool and they was worth mentioning here. I do have another suggestion, and this is a curveball one, and this one might be a little bit contentious because you could replace the stereo system with a multi-channel system, because when you have more speakers in a room positioned optimally, even if you're listening to stereo music that's going through some type of upmix algorithm, stereo music can sound very enveloping, very room-filling, very full and engaging for the whole room. And I can't help but think that is a live concert type of sound, one that very much wraps around you. And of course, we have Atmos music available through Apple Music and through Tidal, but I would be thinking more about stereo music. And the reason I bring this up is because I've calibrated with Dirac Live a number of customers' systems where they listen to stereo music through multi-channel all of the time because they like the enveloping, the immersion of it. And because it does give you it's very much a wraparound, very immersive, very full sound that's possible to get close to with a stereo system and a hi-fi system. And the hi-fi system does some things better in ways, but to try and get that big scale immersion from a hi-fi system is much harder than if you have multiple speakers around the room, because of course, you have proper, localized sound coming at you from different directions. So maybe a multi-channel system could be a great way of having a more live concert sound in your listening room. So I have done my best there to answer, I think, a very tricky question, because there's so many holes in that question. We don't have enough information. But I think I've come up with a few very interesting options there at different price points to give, different flavors of a live concert sound. But I'm very interested to know whether you agree with me or whether you can come up with some other better solutions, some better offerings, some better suggestions to hit a live concert sound for Basker from a tower speaker, especially without going too crazy expensive, because it's easier the more budget you have to play with. So make sure you let me know down below in the comment section. I'm sure you will. And I also want to know whether you think I understood the brief correctly. Is a live concert sound, do you agree with me? It's all about like energetic and liveliness and the music as a whole rather than the specifics. Let me know what you think on that as well. We do need to think about, or speak about, the second question, which is, are hi-fi speakers worth spending a lot of money on? And this is a great question because, yes is an easy answer, but I think you have to tender that answer with, you don't need to spend fortunes on hi-fi speakers to get a very good speaker, to get a very good sound. But I think it's worth flipping that on its head. And if you do go looking for speakers and you do find the ones that really speak to you, that you really like, whether it's from an aesthetic or hopefully from a sound, but normally it's a bit of both, isn't it? The design and the sound. If you really like them and they really speak to you, and they are more money and you will need to spend more money on them, well then of course it's 100% worth doing so. And I think at that point it's irrelevant what anybody else says or thinks or shows you a measurement, in a graph. If they speak to you, if you like them, if they fit your home, they fit your style, fit your room, that is all that really matters. And of course, in that instance, I definitely think they're worth spending more money on. And maybe people will disagree with me on that. Again, let me know down below in the comments section. So this video really has just been a bit of a talking piece, really. But I thought these are legitimate questions. This is a legitimate person, Basker Das, who sent me this email. I'm going to try and make some more of these types of videos, like talking pieces, to get us thinking, to get us, looking at different options. I think it's really interesting. And, let me know which of those speakers you think best suits the brief. I think probably the JBLs would best suit the brief, combined maybe with the horn speakers. But, let me know down below. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it useful and interesting. Something a little bit different from me. And I'll see you in the next one.